What is going on, Pats Nation? You guys already know who it is. Patriots Club here, back with another video, and in this one, I want to talk about some of my winners and losers from the New England Patriots Week 1 preseason matchup against the New York Giants, in which, obviously, as we all know, they did unfortunately lose. I actually thought this was a very interesting game, and there was a lot of takeaways from this game, so without further ado, let's just hop into it. Now, as you guys know, I usually like to do these in order now from, winners and then losers, or losers then winners, instead of doing back-to-back. It's just easier for everyone. So let's start off with the winners, because at the end of the day, I actually have more winners than losers from this game, despite the loss. And first up is going to be Josh Uche. And I feel like every offseason, whether that's preseason or whether that's training camp, Josh Uche always stands out, and then he meets the regular season, and he just doesn't get a lot of playing time. But Josh Uche was the best defensive lineman for the Patriots in this game, constantly applying pressure, constantly collapsing the pocket. I mean, Josh Uche and rookie Sam Roberts were the Patriots' defensive line in this game. They were the pass rush in this game, and they absolutely stood out. I mean, if you guys replay this game about 90% of the time, you look at the pass rush from this defensive line, and it either came from Josh Uche or it came from Sam Roberts. Now, in this game, Josh Uche was able to record 1 sack, 2 pressures, 1 drop, and actually did really well against the run. A lot of these players didn't do too well against the run. Josh Uche did pretty well. He had a 72.4 overall run defensive grade, which was one of the best out of all defensive players from this game. And one of the big things about Josh Uche is that he's been a great pass rusher, but he's been inconsistent and was not able to hold up his own against the run. And in this game, although there were times I would say he wasn't able to hold up his own against the run, he did a lot better from what we've seen in the past in that area. And to put things into perspective, those statistics Josh Uche put up were not through 4 quarters, weren't through 3 quarters. Josh Uche did not play that much at all. He actually only played 23 total snaps, which was 27% of the defensive snaps. That ranked second fewest among edge rushers for this game. The lowest performance as an edge rusher was DeMarcus Mitchell, with 11 defensive snaps being 13% overall. There's still a big looming question on who exactly is going to be the guy opposite of Matthew Judon when it comes to rushing the passer for the regular season, which starts in just about a month now. Whether that's going to be Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, who's starting to stand out, Ronnie Perkins, there's a battle there, and Josh Uche, I would say, up to this point, is definitely in competition with Anthony Jennings to take over that spot. Next winner on this list, and this is somebody I almost put first. I mean, these are in no specific order, but man, Mack Wilson, y'all. Mack Wilson is a guy that stood out in this game from the second the defense stepped on the field. And why did he stand out? Because of speed. Now, speed overall defensively has stood out tremendously, at least from the first preseason game we saw, but even so far this offseason, throughout OTAs, minicamp, training camp, defensively, the speed is there, which is something we have not seen from this defense in a while, and something that has plagued this defense, especially last year in those back-to-back losses to the Buffalo Bills. Mack Wilson's speed is showing, and he might not be the most athletic player. He might not be the most gifted player. But because of that speed, he is getting to the ball carrier a lot faster than these other linebackers from the Patriots that we've seen. Guys like Dante Hightower, Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy, guys who are definitely gifted, but unfortunately they're slow. So it doesn't matter how gifted you are if it's going to take you longer to get to the ball carrier. Honestly, in every phase, Mack Wilson showed that he can be a difference maker. Whether it's rushing the passer, because he actually almost had a sack on a blitz on starting quarterback Daniel Jones, but he also showed his ability in the running game, which I did not expect him to do. He stood out a lot for me, specifically in the running game. In the passing game, honestly, I was expecting a lot more with his speed, with him being more of a coverage linebacker. He really didn't perform too well in that area. That's one knock I do have on him in this game. But, man, that speed stands out. And if you have speed, no matter what position you are in football, speed kills. And Mack Wilson only saw about 29% of defensive snaps with a total of 25. And if we go ahead and we look at his statistics here, He had one quarterback hit, one stop. He had a 79.9 overall run defensive grade, guys. He was just below 0.1 below an 80 overall run defensive grade. That was the best. He was the best graded run defender out of all defensive players for the New England Patriots in this game. And again, that comes down to his awareness, but also his speed, because once he notices what the play is and who has the ball and where the ball carrier is, that speed gets him to the player in blazing speed. Again, unfortunately, in coverage, he didn't do too well. This is an area that I was expecting him to be a lot better on. He's definitely, and he showed that in this game, that he's a sideline to sideline linebacker, but he was targeted 4 times in this game in the passing game. He allowed all 4 receptions for 41 yards and allowed a passer rating of 109.4. Again, the Patriots are definitely going to rely on Mack Wilson in every phase of this game, and with that speed, you are going to be asked to have more coverage duties, and he has the speed to be able to do so. It's just more so those instincts and being able to diagnose what play is going to occur offensively. But man, let me tell you guys, I am so excited to see Mack Wilson, because what he brings to this defense is something we have not seen in a long time. Now, next up on this list is going to be another guy that just, man, we talk about all the time in the offseason standing out. And then the regular season hits, and they are just never able to continue that hype. And man, would I love this guy to continue the hype. And that's Christian Wilkerson, who really has been very, very quiet this offseason, whether that's been in OTAs, mini camp, training camp. I would say over the last few days of training camp, he's picked it up a little bit, but he's been very quiet. And with the Patriots wide receiver core being so stacked with quality NFL talent, is it the best core in the NFL? No, but actual guys who could contribute and definitely would be picked up by another team. This unfortunately is just a year where Christian Wilkerson really had to show out to make the final roster. You have Devontae Parker, you drafted Tyquan Thornton, you have Jacoby Myers, you have Kendrick Bourne. Your receiving core is pretty stacked, especially with most locked-in starters, not to mention Trey Nixon still trying to make this roster. And man, Christian Wilkerson just in this game made it a lot harder for the Patriots to figure out what exactly they wanted to do. He was the top receiver for the Patriots in this game, especially when it comes to moving the chains. Now, he was targeted a total of 12 times. He was also targeted the most times out of any player in this game. But he had a total of 8 receptions for 99 yards and 0 touchdowns. Now, I do believe that when it comes to making the final roster, especially this roster for the Patriots, it's more about what have you done for me recently and not what did you want to do. We saw this with Maurice Harris a couple of years ago, where he was absolutely standing out for this team throughout 3 quarters of the offseason. And then right towards the end in August, preseason came, cutdowns came, and he got quiet, he got injured, and he got cut by the Patriots at the end, which no one saw coming. So I actually think that there's still a shot for Christian Wilkerson to make this team, but the time is now. He didn't show out all offseason. He has to continue to show out for the rest of the offseason, the rest of the preseason, like he did in this game. Luckily for him, we have joint practice coming up with the Panthers. This is a prime opportunity for him to show out in those days of camp, to continue to show out the rest of training camp, and of course, show out in the final 2 preseason games, while also showcasing a little something there on special teams. If he can do that, then he's going to push the envelope to make this final roster and be the last receiver to make the roster for the Patriots. I mean, he really didn't get too much opportunities last year, but there were a couple of times that he did get some regular season opportunities, and he did see a little bit of a connection there with Mac Jones. Unfortunately for Christian Wilkerson, the thing that's really plagued him from being a starter on this team has been his inconsistencies. He's very inconsistent. He'll randomly miss wide open passes and have random drops, and that's been his issue. If he can cut those out and he can really showcase off the rest of the offseason, he's going to definitely, like I said, push that envelope into making that last wide receiver spot. Now, next up is another wide receiver and a guy that I'm actually really excited to talk about, and that's Lil Jordan Humphrey, Lil Jordan Humphrey was not signed all that long ago by the Patriots, and he looked pretty damn good out there. Again, Lil Jordan Humphrey was just signed a few weeks ago, and he was one of the top players for the Patriots here in this game offensively. You know, he was up there with guys like Christian Wilkerson and Trey Nixon, guys who have been with this team for a while. He was playing better than guys who have been in this system for a couple of years. He actually caught the second most passes behind Christian Wilkerson for 6 passes on 62 yards and 1 touchdown. The touchdown that should have been the game winner, but unfortunately, as we all know, defense wasn't able to hold their end and Giants kicked a game-winning field goal. Honestly, what surprised me this much with Lil Jordan Humphrey is the fact that he made an impact right away. He made a surprising impact that I did not see coming. He's another player that is going to push the envelope if he continues to play like this for the rest of the offseason into making that push to be the receiver that gets that final roster spot. Now, Lil Jordan Humphrey also has some special teams experience, which is also going to help him, but unfortunately, Christian Wilkerson and Trey Nixon also have that special teams ability too. I mean, guys, this really is just an interesting race between these 3 receivers, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Christian Wilkerson, and Trey Nixon, into who's going to make that final wide receiver spot. Because Lil Jordan Humphrey, as you guys might have heard the announcers say, they thought he was a tight end. He's a wide receiver. He looked big out there. He looks like a tight end playing wide receiver. He's big. He's a big target for the Patriots, which unfortunately there's not a lot of guys like those for the Patriots at the wide receiver position. And I even was impressed with just the contested catchability and the reliability here of Lil Jordan Humphrey. And while he's nowhere close to what Devontae Parker is, we do know that somebody like Devontae Parker does have an injury history. If you can get Lil Jordan Humphrey on the roster or even the practice squad and use him as elevations, he could be a good replacement if you need to replace Devontae Parker at some point in the season due to injury. He's someone that's not the fastest, but he's a big receiver who's going to play on the perimeter, can play on the inside if need be within the middle of the field. He's going to get those 50-50 balls for you, and he's going to be somebody that you can rely on. Now, I do have 2 more winners, one of which is going to be Trey Nixon. Now, I do want to say Trey Nixon just because ultimately he did have a good game in the second half. In the first half, he wasn't good, and honestly, going into halftime, I was ready to put him on my losers list. Not being able to convert on 3rd down, which should have been an easy catch, actually an excellent, accurate throw by Brian Hoyer. And just ultimately that first half, Trey Nixon didn't do anything. But then we go out into that second half, and he puts on an absolute show. Both Trey Nixon and Christian Wilkerson are forming an excellent connection here with rookie quarterback Bailey Zappi. And we also know that Mac Jones and Trey Nixon also have that connection. When Trey Nixon came in, he was drafted by the Patriots the same year that Mac Jones was. Mac Jones and Trey Nixon really clicked together. So while he didn't have a good start, he definitely had a great finish as he was able to put up 4 receptions for 81 yards. And for a small guy who we all thought would just play in the slot and play into the middle of the field, he was used a lot as a boundary outside wide receiver, and he made his best plays as an outside wide receiver, surprisingly. Again, just 4 receptions for 81 yards. He was a guy that you can easily say moved the chains for the Patriots, gave them those big splash plays that they're looking for desperately in this 2022 season. So if he can continue to do that and perform that way with Patriots starting quarterback Mac Jones, then, Trey Nixon is a guy who, again, we're watching to make this final roster. But guys, my last winner here, it's a guy that I said before, and I had to absolutely include him on this list. It would feel highly disrespectful to not do so, and that is the rookie Sam Roberts. He had an excellent game, and I think it goes really untalked about. I mean, there were a couple of players here for the Patriots. Both him and LeBron Ray I thought had pretty good games, but I would say that Sam Roberts had a little bit of a better game. And you look at the interior of the Patriots defensive line for the regular season, they need one, depth, but two, they need another guy outside of Christian Barmore who's going to give you pass rush ability. And we're asking, who is that guy going to be? The Patriots didn't draft one. The Patriots need to sign one in free agency. The Patriots need to make a trade. The Patriots might have that guy in Sam Roberts, who also is able to be on special teams as a field goal blocking expert. Now, the Patriots actually used Sam Roberts more than any defensive tackle in this entire game. Sam Roberts saw 67% of defensive snaps with a total of 58 of them, and he also led the Patriots in pressures. There was actually a play, you guys might have seen this gone viral on Instagram or Twitter, but he absolutely obliterated the Giants' first-round offensive line selection, Evan Neal, for a sixth-round pick to absolutely destroy a first-round offensive lineman. Just goes to show the potential here of Sam Roberts. Roberts was able to put up a total of 5 pressures, 1 stop, did have a missed tackle, didn't put up a great run defensive grade with an overall grade of 41.3. With that being said, I don't expect Sam Roberts, if he makes this roster, to be somebody that is an all-down defensive tackle. I see him as your Adam Butler role. But y'all, where there is good, there is bad, and I do have a couple of losers, not nearly as much as I do winners, but one thing I do want to talk about here is the run game. The run game was absolutely terrible in this game. I think for the most part, the offensive line did do well. Now, obviously, we had some tackle issues with Yanni Kajust and Justin Herman both going out with injuries. But I did think that Brian Hoyer, for the most part, was mainly protected. Bailey Zappi did look like he was running around a bit, but he's also a rookie. His first NFL game, he's going to hold on to the ball longer. He's going to have jitters. So how much of that can you say was on the offensive line and how much was on the quarterback? But the Patriots put up a total of 52 rushing yards. Now, not one running back got 52 yards, guys. We had a total of 52 rushing yards throughout 4 quarters of this game. Pierre Strong was your leading running back. Pierre Strong had 6 attempts for only 25 yards. J.J. Taylor had 5 attempts for 16 yards. Kevin Harris had 6 attempts for 9 yards and a touchdown. And then Bailey Zappi had 1 rush for 2 yards. And honestly, what this came down to was that there were no holes opened up, guys. This is something that we've been hearing throughout the entirety of training camp. The running game's not going. The running game isn't getting any holes. These offensive linemen are not opening holes up for these running backs who, hey, last year they looked absolutely spectacular opening up these holes for Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson and company, being one of the best run games in the entire NFL. Yes, granted, you don't have David Andrews in there. Cole Strange did not play a lot. Trent Brown isn't in there. Isaiah Wynn isn't in there. Most of your starters aren't in there. But we are still hearing these same issues with the starters, and the fact that these backups are still not able to get the job done against, starters to second and third stringers is definitely concerning. Now, next up is Jawan Williams, and at this point, all I have to say is I don't know how this guy is still on the team. He was a guy that I thought before roster cutdowns, maybe the Patriots could potentially trade, but honestly, at this point, I think Jawan Williams is just going to end up being a straight cut by the Patriots because I just don't even know what value he has. He's not making himself look good. He hasn't made himself look good throughout, honestly, the entirety of his NFL career. He didn't show that he was ready to take a starting role last year, and honestly, a year later, he doesn't look any better whatsoever to take in a starting role, and the Patriots are at a position where it's wide open for any defensive back to come in and win over a starting job. This is the most important preseason of Jawan Williams' career, and he has done absolutely nothing, especially in a contract year, to say, hey, I deserve to be in the NFL. He was actually the player to give up the Giants' first touchdown from Thursday's game. And if you actually go ahead and look back at that play, you guys can find it on the highlights of this game, he just totally gets beat. I mean, it's not even close. It's not close coverage. It's not a great catch. It's not a great throw. The guy basically just slowly walks into the end zone at this point it was just an unpadded practice. And they were only 5-7 yards out into the red zone, and the coverage still by Jawan Williams was just absolutely horrendous. yeah, I mean, you look at this game and Jawan Williams had one stop. If we go ahead and we look at his statistics, he was targeted 4 times, allowed 3 receptions for 20 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pass breakup. He had 1 flag, and he allowed a passer rating of 125. There was actually one point where that Alex Barth pointed out that Jawan Williams got benched at one point. Guys, this is a preseason game. This is where your second and third stringers, your rookies are getting playtime to get adapted, to show what you have. You don't care about winning these games. You care about development and seeing what you have. Even if things are tough, you usually let those players out on the field to learn and honestly just fight through the adversity. But in a preseason game, the Patriots decided to pull out Jawan Williams because he was doing that bad. And my last loser on this list is going to be Justin Herman. Now, I'm not including him on this list because he went down with an injury. I'm not including Yanni Kajust on this list, so obviously that's not the case. It was just another unfortunate series of events here for Justin Herman, but he just did not play a good game here for the Patriots at all. I would say he was probably the worst offensive lineman here for New England. I mean, again, he went down with an injury. He only played a total, if we look at his offensive snaps, of about 69%. And he's a guy that I definitely believe would have played a lot longer if he didn't go down with that injury, which showcases to me that the Patriots are still trying to figure out who their swing tackle is and who's ultimately going to be on this offensive line or not, which just shows that Justin Herman is no lock. But Herman led up 1 pressure, 1 hurry, and he was their worst run blocker in this game. Now look, Yanni Kajust, he didn't do all that much better. He also allowed 1 pressure, 1 hurry. His run blocking was a little bit better. He had a 42.7 overall run blocking grade, but Justin Herman, out of all the blockers in this game, and I'm talking running backs, tight ends, centers, offensive tackles, offensive guards, Justin Herman had the worst run blocking grade with a 39 overall run blocking grade. Not to mention the fact that he also had 2 penalties called on him. If you guys remember early on in the season last year, the Patriots offense, especially this offensive line, had a lot of penalties called on them, which is really what put them in a lot of really bad situations, put them in a lot of 3rd and 4th and longs. And because of that, this offense did not have a lot of success early on because of those penalties, these tacky, unneeded penalties. They got to cut those out. They can't start off slow again this year, especially when it comes to penalties. And that includes Justin Herman. But those are going to be my winners and losers from the Patriots versus Giants first week of the preseason. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, along with liking this video and, of course, subscribing to the channel for all of your New England Patriots news. But like always, I appreciate you guys for watching, and go Pats.
In Astroworld.